Hit the dock. Okay, Coppell good?
Yep. Just kicked her.
Mm-hmm.
Just one second.
Okay.
It just came. Alright, I'm good.
Cool. They've conceded 2 case turn. This debate is over. Do not let them skirt out of this. We have impact turn their structural criticisms of the West and NATO. Those things are directly outlined in 1AC taglines. They've defended subject formation and resolving instances of NATO/security cooperation inflicted violence, and we have impact turn that as a bad political movement. They cannot go for but we don't spill up because this is a criticism of anti-NATO and academia, which all our evidence refers to, and in leftist movements, which they clearly endorse as per all their cross-sex answers. You should not let wishy-washy K-words get them out of a structural disagreement with the 1AC, but extinction matters. That one, it's a prior question over ontological assumptions, because the premise of ontology assumed existence is a prior question to essence. But even if they won ontological claims about the world, logistics, etc., all of those claims assume existence as a starting point, solving it a prior question. Second is that it's irreversible. It's the only try or die scenario, because if when extinction happens, in the world there's little incentive to prioritize their thought process, especially when they were saying that an inevitable thing is bad, but it is not. But they have to not reverse it, because then none of their evidence constitutes to bring claims. You should err heavily and neg on this, but it's a reason why magnitude should be centered in your impact calculus, because their questions ignore how extinction reframes all other events. A third is morality. Extinction affects all bodies, even with ones with different subjectivities. In the same way, logistics, climate change, etc., may affect people in different ways, but an extinction level event from them would all affect people the same way. But on the Russia term proper, their criticisms of NATO and the West is imperialism that muddles Russia's incoordinate role in its invasion of Ukraine, justifying the war. This card gives the example of the left criticizing NATO extension after the Ukraine conflict. A misunderstanding of imperialism is only Western. The F has fallen victim to the ineffective left policy that anything anti-Western must also be anti-imperialist, when instead anti-NATO criticisms have pro-imperialist outcomes, like justifying the Russian role in Ukraine as simply responsive to Western imperialism instead of a complex geopolitical power struggle between 2 imperial powers. It also indicts leftist anti-NATO protests as simply ineffective political imaginary, because these structures exist far above the movement's ability to solve them. We should evaluate this as a case turn because they justify imperialism elsewhere, but also do not solve it here. This evidence is specific to movements and academic spaces, which is terminal. And so their concession, this evidence is terminal af. As a terminal af, take out the Star 22 evidence and turns the case. Russia is the most racist country on earth and are striving to enact a literal fascist survival that outweighs any of their offense. Article 15. Social movements in Russia, the extreme nationalists, again, movement roughly half the world's population, race and violence occurs in the new related based data for the violent country, ethnic and racial minorities, and economic populations like race groups in Russia. Its support policy of Ukraine versus little for years higher than a decade in U.S. Russia being a high level of violence and technology difference which further resistant nature of Russian violence difference had long pedigree demonstrated in the FC thinkers that do great white race with the Eurasian character to become more an official vaccine area starting to academic studies here and played in a race and violence of literature government policy thinking espousing races emerged. Resounded Joe Weitzman, the police often lead people that are the most extreme political ever documented place extortion and targeting minority in support of the American KKK right union. The evidence is such that liberation motivates systemic violence in Russian summit. Texts on their mosques are shouting white power and race convention by David Duke, and the white world future of the great white race. And the 1AC is West planning NATO bad without a viable alternative. Fees, ethnocentrism, and unchecked genocide voting AF is aligned with fascism. Brom 22. Treating Western left as in the left circle, died who's in charge of the majority of war crimes of zero. I was a Putin Russian to be in Ukraine to terrify no Westerners. You never go to Western expressions so warm. And they would actually create a conflict with the lack of knowledge in Russia. Astonishing you to go to Orientalism, decades after Russia turned to her by capital authoritarian regime, still claiming that it's an anti-imperialist despite and rebuild Russian empire. Similarly, NATO always approve everything bad when you say that NATO is here to not care about the safety of my comrades. You talk about the desires of NATO speech. You don't really mention would be a viable alternative that not acceptable. Should your privilege beyond what is a political West plan. The UAE could falls because lies a little disorientation after is protecting individual social power. The Putin for hegemony or vast empire of aggressor and critics of NATO's military intervention using Eurocentric assumptions backfire. The epistemic and ontological flaws the research method warrant rejection. Sabran 13. Letters to call the question the foreign appeal global order and anti-imperialism orientation over the Christian failed to address the deeper policy Eurocentrism and thinking research policy international systems, understanding the possibility of epistemology getting beyond the limits of our deeper reason Eurocentrism and the stability of Europe and who took and politically just in the ways that determine over the world policy. Many critical leaders of religious Eurocentrism assumed Europe as the political subject of the tendency to see emerging capitals in Western drive Western hyper-rich in terms of the historical development ideal Europe and the situation of the rest of the way imperial stage of Britain. You are the implicit subject of world history, criticism the character, goal, and reinforce the coloniology and digital avatar to be considered the understanding of our political possibilities, generally legitimate Western primacy, the possibilities, condition, and speeding us to an with the limited skill, but anti-imperialism also can look like how the card it can look like, and NATO is not inherently capitalist or imperialist. Hudson 22. Countries joined up a democratic consent of Russia and a bring new beyond Germany, NATO, if you predict the American fury and NATO members to solve a state of attacking into a Turkey, raising Kurdish allies and NATO refusal during the invasion of Iraq and the left vessel for capitals of history, so otherwise labor signed the treaty article did not prevent those straight to well pushing Norway and Denmark for democracy, but we don't need to win, then NATO is perfect, just the better or too bad. They did a good thing in the past, like Katrina really stopped the genocide, the Kosovo, Albanians assisting the African Union, etc. Prove they're not irredeemable, made to try or die to avoid a Russian world order, but they dropped the first extinction scenario. They dropped the first extinction scenario of extended genocide, but here's another one. Russia's revisionist. Putin wants the Baltics. Now says 18. Using Norway about the mindset, the criminal war that versus the black hole, the agreements that Putin expressed that Western democracy agreements that personal experience trauma the USSR called Putin should be to return to the great powers of being competent and extinction to trade the Russian nation to immediate but the Russian foreign policy across the pursuit of military neutral that NATO allies the EU creation of a liberal government to diversity fear and influence the project Russian power and the world to pursue the objective using natural resources and invasion of Ukraine to have an influence in rebuilding the nuclear military in Syria. Putin and Tiger back to the Soviet Union cut the card at Soviet Union, and that caused extinction because of Article 5 draw on Kuhn 18. The center started the Russian Leningrad and the Baltic High Risk near the deaths of the military close to Latvia, the action NATO on notice NATO direct and reserve, which give Russia into Vienna to the Russian force of the region NATO to its administrative ending, but the withdrawal and AC would invoke Article 5 notice to the escalate conflict with the Russian territory to the brink of Armageddon. All the news nuclear countermeasure means proceed as we rebel new blood became a number of pathways for escalation through misperception, cut the card and misperception. The next term we're going for is tech innovation, good because of China emerging technologies and the concept of NATO's heated deterrence. Otherwise, the alliance falls behind Russia and China. Their sword 20 weapons. They conceded a claim that we don't have to win. That technology, the technology is good, and we agree that it's probably inevitable, but it's inevitable with our adversaries, and only investing in itself because defense innovation is key to deterrence and defense posture. They don't have an alternative form of deterrent nor a claim to solve it, which means that NATO is the only agile actor capable of maintaining a strategic advantage, only outpacing with tech prevents Taiwan invasion. They have to perceive the U.S. and NATO as having an asymmetric advantage, otherwise they'll take a victory in China's aiming to Taiwan imminently leads to U.S.-China war. That's Palooza 1019 evidence that they conceded, which gives 100% risk of an impact, which means even if you're not super rocking with the link, you have to check out on a 100% risk extinction scenario. And invasion of Taiwan causes quick extinction. Advances of China tech are inevitable. It's only a question of if we keep up or not. How in Kelly 21. She declared that China wants to be unification, what China will be used to the states as mere political centers that we never see Chinese demand China. It's a good general the avenue U.S. intervention Taiwan order currency unity. China says that we capable of speaks out China military doctrine plus favor such as China we threaten U.S. it effectively means deterring U.S. opposed to decline invincibility leading falsehood to this time without a fight. They're going to add a fight, and even if they don't invade Taiwan, Chinese led order immediately calls extinction. Wing 19. Rising power PSA tells the United States are competitive for embassy to affect the military rebels. The American legislation undermine U.S. land Russia or held over the Chinese contesting American global leadership unit authority to present government. China to order fundamental odds with the LA of the China order so politically harassment of U.S. patriots searching his logical jurors for war nationals getting into WMD rising China on silence they tried to on top of nearly impossible go to the dissad. We're not going for this as an independent offense. Oh, okay. Okay. Take breath real quick. Sorry. Okay. Okay. 804. I'm good for cross.
Okay. Alright. First, what about... Oh wait, my timer got deleted. Okay. First, what about discourse within debate collapses hegemony broadly?
We've read a criticism of leftist politics that identify U.S./NATO imperialism as the only issue. We think it papers over
this is in the
the
context
facts.
of political movements. I'm asking, what about us discussing in this debate round causes Russia or China to get mad at us?
Well, that's what I'm saying. You've like claimed these subject formation claims and spill up claims to like solving larger like instances of violence and aligning yourselves like with these movements. We think that is bad. Affirming them is bad. We have a structural criticism with affirming imperialism in other instances.
So then, I guess my question is, there's lots of leftist political movements now. There have been for many decades. Why is the impact not happening?
I don't get why y'all think this is such a good argument that like these things exist. Like that is not persuasive when you conceded a structural case. You've like dropped a case turn and you're like, oh, but movements exist now and it hasn't happened. We have identified that affirming and aligning with Western movements. Also, this is about the Ukraine conflict. So all of those are probably irrelevant unless you can give an example of a super recent one. Yes, it is actually. But also we said that all of our evidence is post-Ukraine, but also we have a structural disagreement with the way you've aligned with Western politics. You conceded extinction level risks to that, which means there is, like, frankly, only a risk that aligning with them further justifies imperialism.
All relies on the fact that we spill out of debate to bolster these leftist movements, which creates anti-hegemonic discourse. I'm asking, what's the internal link between debate and more leftist movements?
Because you yourself have made subject formation claims about how you create people that are capable of, like, combating logistics, combating violence inflicted by these structures. So either you don't solve or you link to the case turn.
What evidence have you read that's specific to combating logistics?
Like the 1AC, like I agree you don't really have evidence about the topic, but we think that you have like made subject formation claims about how you train people to combat these structures. We think that is bad. We should not combat.
So if anyone has any subject formation that is left, then hegemony collapses.
This is a criticism of your form of subject formation, of criticism of criticisms of NATO expansion without a viable alternative to them. We think it greenlights increased Russian imperialism because you paper over the fact that US is not the only imperial power in the world.
Okay, sure. I guess the tech innovation card, what about the app sort of precludes tech innovation?
We think you have criticized logistical involvement, specifically in the context of NATO advancing that technology. You've criticized that as bad. However, we think that we agree with you, technology is an inevitability. However, NATO needs to keep increasing their investment in it to outpace our adversaries.
So a lot of these links just sound like if you talk about it, then all of this happens.
What do you mean if you talk about it? These are disagreements with the things you have affirmed in the round.
Wait, NATO needs technology. What about the app stops NATO from getting technology?
You have affirmed that you create a subject formation of people capable of dismantling that. That is bad.
The order's the counter advocacy. There's one card I sent it out in the body of an email. Scan, please. So now everybody gets a card. Or I guess it's like a little thing on the dissad and then the counter advocacy. Okay. Dan, are you good? Okay, Coppell.
Yep.
Cool. I'll start then. First thing, on the dissad, we agree that the app will spill up, but we're not going to go for it as an independent impact scenario. Natalie did the work above the 2 and C, and go to the counter advocacy. The counter advocacy solved the entirety of the app. There's no security cooperation warrant in the 1AC or the 2AC. Their evidence does not make a call for cooperation of any kind of political advocacy in the opposition to security cooperation. Few implications here. Either you vote negative on presumption because the 1AC does not have a causal influence on politics, or St. Mark's will host the open public forum discussion about deconstructing logistics. There's no reason why we cannot engage in the discourse in an open forum. We have a banquet with snacks. We talk about militant preservation for hours there on end. St. Mark's can host a public discussion about the 1AC's politics. We can all hang out in the library, have a book club, discuss their advocacy. We invite authors to come speak, and y'all could present it. That's net better because we allow more than 3 people to hear about it at a time, i.e. it lets your classmates, community, and others hear about it, which is good because it exposes the advocacy to people who aren't well versed in it, and it specifically solves militant preservation because all of their arguments are about how debate and round robin invitations and competition being bad is resolved by an open forum. It chooses to steal ways from the round and fine times community by gathering external forces of debate similar to the black brunch it solves rather than the affirmative. It says we do not engage in the competitive nature of debate. They have not articulated why why competition is inherently key to the absolvency or to deconstructing logistics, but we have multiple reasons why the competition in the debate space is bad for their advocacy. The affirmative's argument that the community is good and that we should have come together, but they make that impossible. Competition always overcomes the debate. The non-competitive base forum probably as a result all of your offense when it says the debate needs to be reprogrammed, which it still assumes that the same classical logic that you evaluate the ballot story proves competition overcodes debate, and that the affirmative is not about creating communities of care, but utilizing communities to care to get a ballot. Extend the love evidence marriage makes it significantly harder to address the problems it causes. It makes the violence inevitable because your method engagement does not force a shift on our relationship to our objects. And the Murray evidence extended their theory groups stereotypes and reproduces imperial IR, creating a monolith of what is blackness, reduces people to their identities and their stereotypes. Painting a whole community as a monolith is violent and reinforces cultural and ethnic divides. And this is a re-highlighting of their evidence. The affirmative does not change the debate phase, but the counter advocacy sure does. Dubsy reads pink. The Rikers Code decisions debaters have engaged in outreach and recruitment practices designed to diversify the debate community. Discussions supported access actions generated from debate and recruitment competition. Those discussions occurred in a collaborative versus competitive settings, and stakeholders were encouraged to dialogue without concern for winners or losers. That disproves all of their arguments. Go to the net benefit. We are winning with 100% risk of a net benefit since they have not disputed it. There are 3 versus alliance factoring. If we win, if the debate is subject formation offense, it means that it is a question of how debate subjects and understand and engage with their context. The one I see in competition drives individuals away from political alliance because it forces scholars to criticize the discourse of other scholars. It causes epistemic and fighting academia. It means that movements can never build coalitions, reverse advocacy to unethical decision making and presumption. Debates are not a public information. They are not a catalog. Debaters eventually leave debate. No individual debater materially or rhetorically reshapes the debate community or communal ethics outside of debate. It means that only distinction that exists between an open forum and public discussion and debate competition, that the 1AC advocacy doesn't do anything. But even if a will-win offense about why the competition fractures coalitions and violence in competition, under their models, debaters are forced to negate people's identities and their what it means to be that, and it makes us disinterested in ethics because the competition undergrades the educational value of ethics debates. Their model forces negative to defend unethical positions to counter advocacy. The framework stuff, cross-apply the framework stuff here, the permutation. The counter advocacy is competitive. The part that's distinct from the one to see even if the perm links to net benefit. That means permutations still relies on the competition created by the affirmative advocacy in the debate. That links to all of our offense cross the net benefit stuff. There's an academia that said to the permutation. Their links link extra hard to the line fracturing arguments. Permutation creates confusion surrounding the advocacy, which creates infighting movements and a mechanism of expression. Advocacy undermines the effectiveness of either strategy. That turns case got checked. All the details are to a different form. They do not have solvency deficit. Competition is not inevitable. We solve it. A competition strategy does not test. It creates a more dogmatic solution to link on the open forum where people are collective incentive to generate solutions because they have no need to win or lose. I'm going to go line by line with their arguments. The counter advocacy is not exclusive to whiteness. Anyone can engage in the forum. Its purpose is to educate others about your right to actually create change. We saw better discussions of whiteness are better done in outside of a competitive space because there's no risk of polarization, dogmatic responses to force negation to race discourse. Cross-apply that net benefit here. The research argument is stupid. You can present your research in the forum. It still requires people to do research in order to present the ideas correctly. Forcing people to go out and research about logistics to adopt their own method of deconstructing them interpersonally is an accessible method to everyone. The forum definitely is, and the preservation argument has no link to an open forum discussion. It reframes the radical politics of the movement of militant preservation. Anything else you need?
No.
Okay. I need prep.
Yeah, 8:45. Start now.
Save it real quick.
Y'all are my first all in-person debate of the season that I've judged. So,
It's fun. That's so exciting.
because I wasn't judging at Grapevine because I was in the tab room, and then we only had online. And yesterday, all my debates were hybrid.
No, hybrid sucks. Stop for 3 minutes.
Are there any cards?
Yeah.
So order is going to be case, like counter ethics.
Okay. I got it. Is it just the Ahmed 22 doc?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. What's the order? Sorry.
It's going to be case and then
Exactly.
counter ethics.
Cool.
Here, what else?
Logistics is aim for every modal social production seeks a cybernetic and mirror logistical practice into debate vote affirm for multiple preservation. They have conceded for 3 straight speeches that logistics is a here and happening now. Overcodes are a cognitive linguistic process. The way we relate to each other is determined by logistics. Only multiple preservation solves the app, trace the code of logistical governance, and turns and works to aim data and compute fill the house of violent individuation with sap social energy needed for black and brown students to go endure ongoing logistics and orients us towards planning instead of policy, which is key to combat logistics. The case flow, the impact turns don't really matter if they don't link in the first place. Cross apply all of the link arguments from the hedge just that they apply here equally because it's inevitably about the spillover. The 2C was really good at reading a bunch of cards but failed to explain why any of them link to the app. We win that the extinction scenario is a classic tactic, so a tactic of wildness in order to police the debate space into non-revolutionary action to maintain U.S. primacy. Then you should vote affirmative. The concession of the hedge decide was faulty on several levels. Cross apply the no link arguments from the hedge decide. The impact turns to hedge and the cat bad stuff on the case flow. They all apply to it. They have conceded the link arguments. I'll extend it here. One thing, it's the burden of proof. The burden of proof is on them to prove the internal link solvency to actually collapsing NATO writ large. You should remember the first line of 1C case. You can look back at it at the end of this debate. It says that we have not specifically affected NATO and they've not read T anymore, which means they cannot go for it. But either way, we don't specifically criticize NATO broadly in the 1EC, which means that there's a really small link, but there's a large impact that of logistical violence happening now. That's the case flow. And either way, we're winning impact turns to hegemony, which they have failed to answer in the block. Inevitably, their form of policing and debate rejected because their extinction scenario always forces white supremacy instead of the logistical violence that happens now. They said subject formation. It doesn't matter. The app is about generating sociality, not necessarily formation. We say that logistics is inevitable and NATO is inevitable, but it's a question of dwelling within this cloud cracks and fissures in order to be with each other. The ontology argument doesn't make sense because it means that people are closer to death, which means we should prioritize their lives more. The second argument was irreversible. Future generations will just live and suffering, which means that violence will inevitably keep on happening because logistics happens in waves and retreats, i.e. when something good happens, logistics tries to feels good about itself and doesn't try to move forward, but just looks at it as an end point instead of a concept practice of planning. The morality argument doesn't make sense. Why morality should be rejected because it justifies the death, the ongoing people right now. We're winning the ontology arguments that they themselves have conceded, which means that if some people are closer to death, that you should prioritize the justified Russian role in Ukraine. I'll answer here. I'll read the Ahmed 22 card. You should move beyond the 1E6 false duality in favor of the voice of the press debated forum for testing that only we can solve. Ahmed in 22. Atrocity committed against Marshall used to validate the collective punishment of the Southwest war forces issues two wrongs within a false duality put in, and they do not represent two opposing ideological forces racist capitalists that are sharing NATO guilty of many things. So we should choose forces to get. How can we choose forces rolling and groups to express their rationality, dominant discourse of the universal effect, expressing their effect on global harmony? Many Ukrainians realize NATO states are concerned neither about Ukrainians lives nor freedom. We do not know about them because they are silenced when they are allowed to speak up. Their voices are drowned by the established order, but sides are allowed to speak the language alongside anti-authoritarian ideology and use of people to claim to protect the disposable war material, but maximum exploitation of people in the environment. This is why a different hegemony must take place. The side of the silence whose voice must be echoed loudly. The negation existing rationality, revolution, negation, new world cut, the card, a new world. I'm sorry, no, it's still going.
Okay.
South Dakota, a new world. The next argument about Taiwan, group them, extend the hedge argument from binary 18. The pursuit hegemony prevents international cooperation. Countries like the U.S., Russia, and China working together is key to preventing epidemics that they have conceded as key and solves the Taiwan scenario. The kind of thing. The vote neg on presumption argument doesn't make sense. The app creates social energy that they themselves have now conceded completely. There's been zero explanation of how the counter advocacy solves for any social energy because logistics inevitably fractures their organizing in debate. We're winning critiques of the case and how logistics cause social violence right now that they have completely conceded on case, which means that since logistics overcodes their processes, then you should reject the whole counter advocacy overall. The problem definitely solves. We use debate's competitive nature to test the strategies and further discuss them outside of debate. It's the best of both worlds, and if we win debate is key, then you should vote after the DSRB. Highlight doesn't really say anything, but DSRB says that competitiveness is not shown in the squad room, but it's still key to testing strategies. Competition is key. Their argument about how terms of strategy is not true because our strategy is of planning, which only happens. Planning is key to stop logistics, and that only happens through the competitive nature of debate. There's no sort of terminal impact. It's a defensive argument. Inevitably, the counter advocacy links back to hedge arts on case because this is a direct example of leftist movement organizing the is simply an endurance mechanism in the face of debate. So we don't link. It's pretty embarrassing when the one in our talks all about how the counter advocacy some kumbaya, but fails to mention the Beller evidence. This turns to counter advocacy because it's forced to fundamentally overcoded by logistics, which means that interpersonal violence happens inevitably under their model. There's zero way of solving for social violence because they're always overcoded by logistics. Capitalism is unsustainable. That's the terminal impact. It's completely unsustainable because it causes resource accumulation. That's on the hedge flow and this flow. Because there's too many. Not enough resources.
Where'd it go? Sorry, I need to find where I wrote my.
804, I think.
That sounds right.
Yeah. Okay. 8:04 starting now. Is the door closed?
Yes.
Oh my goodness.
We'll have to figure out who that is, 209.
Thanks. Okay. Counter advocacy within the case. Someone good? Awesome. This is a very easy neg ballot. Either you vote neg on a high risk of the counterblend solves the case with a high risk of a dropped net benefit, or you can check out on the dropped terminal impact to a case turn. Either way, this should be a quick RFD on the counter advocacy proper. It solves the app. There's no security cooperation key warrant in the 1AC or 2AC, nor did the 1 year extend a debate key warrant, which means the same are hosting an open forum discussion about deconstructing logistics solves the entirety of the app competition. Good, that is the crux of the solvency debate. We are miles ahead on is literally the argument we need to win. A few words here. One, for the read re-highlight. This is a functional concession. Their author votes negative, but they says it doesn't say anything. I disagree. It says directors, coaches, assistants, debaters may engage in outreach recruitment practices designed to diversify the debate community, like the solvency mechanism. They explain, but it says discussions and support for such action were not generated from the debate tournament competition. Those discussions occurred in collaborative settings where stakeholders were encouraged to dialogue without concern for winners or losers. This is damning for the 1AC because it proves the competition is terminal defense to their model of solvency, and there's only risk that a competitive nature undercodes their ability to create communities capable of combating logistics. They did not extend the debate key to testing argument, and the winner or the two does not get it. They don't have a debate key warrant, they lose. The Almond card says literally nothing. Don't let them spin. It says there's violence against populations inflicted by NATO, not about their forum at all. A competitive strategy does not test because it creates more dogmatic solutions. An open forum where people have the collective more incentive to generate solutions because they have no need to win or lose. Their only answer here was like logistics over code. It's not an answer because the just links it just as hard to that because they've identified logistics as inevitable. There's only a risk that they link harder to it because it creates an incentive for teams negating, just lean more into logistics and research and cut a bunch of reasons why it's good, which turns the out because they'll never generate effective solutions. It's a very important argument they dropped. They are way too behind to gain any offense now. They do not have a solvency deficit. They dropped a net benefit and they dropped a discounted permutation. This is done. On the net benefit proper, they dropped a lines for action. I shouldn't have to do a lot of work here. If they win any of their debate subject formation, means a question of how individual subjects understand and engage with content. The one competition drives individuals away from political lines because it forces scholars to criticize the discourse of other scholars, causes infighting within academia and within the debate space, in which we can never form a coalition capable of combating logistical violence, and we can never build a coalition that perverts advocacy to unethical decision making, coupled with the argument that they dropped, that you should evaluate more people hearing as independent net benefit to the counter advocacy, because obviously only us four people are already here, but a counter advocacy access to people who have a bigger influence on the debate community, who actually set norms like coaches, people outside people outside of the debate community, etc. Because if logistics is really inevitable, then the best way to solve it is by going outside of the debate community, because that's not the only place it exists in. But on the permutation, absolutely not. Competition, a good bag generates functional competition as well as forum rejection. They drop the academia to decide. I do not have to do a lot of work here. It links extra draw lines, fraction, and permutation creates confusion surrounding advocacy, causes infighting within movements on the mechanism of the expression for the advocacy, undermines the effectiveness of either strategy, returns the case, and is only resolved in open forum discussion because everyone has a collective incentive to generate solutions, to talk about how these problems have been personally inflicted on them, makes it the best possible option on case proper. The 2AR is going to stand up and rant about there's no internal link between the 1AC and K-Stars. Two big reasons why you're not voting on that. One, they dropped extinction level risk. Even if you're unsure about the links here, when the extinction matters most, any small risk of a link internally means you feel comfortable voting neg. This is simple debate math. Risk of a link when they drop extinction means you vote neg. They are too behind to win this debate on defense because they cannot zero the impact. But two, we have criticized the movements and mode of politics. The 1AC has endorsed that is a sufficient, that is a perfectly sufficient link, because we have critiqued the endorsement of leftist anti-imperialism movements as generating the wrong form of resistance. But in the extinction first debate, they dropped that it's a prior question to ontological claims because the premise of ontology assumes that existence is a prior question to essence. So even if they win ontological claims about the world and how some people are more affected by logistics than others, all of those claims assume an existence in the world as a starting point, as their independent reason. You should err neg on the extinction claim, but and second is irreversibility. Where winning it happens really after little incentive to prioritize their thought process, which means that the recoding logistics stuff and inevitable violence literally does not matter because this is not a question of root cause, rather reverse cause. So we're the only team capable of resolving our impacts. We're winning 100% why they lock in extinction. But on the Russia scenario proper, I do not have to do a lot of work here. They dropped it. The criticism of NATO in the West of imperialism and muddle structure and insubordinate role in invasion of Ukraine, which justifies the war because love criticizing NATO expansion after Ukraine began as a misunderstanding of imperialism and that only the West can inflict imperialism, which is not true. Papers over imperialist powers like Russia hot the Tatra 22. It turns the case that they dropped that Russia is the most racist country on the earth and are striving to enact a literal fascist survival, which probably creates way more logistical violence than anything the U.S. can do, which outweighs any offense are going to go for its Arnold 15. But they also, which is an eternal case defense, also drop the Russians and is supercharged that they will invade the Baltics. It'll go at extinction because Article 5 drawing, they dropped an extinction level risk. This is an easy ballot.
3 minutes.
3 minutes starting now. case and the counter advocacy. Alright. Everything good? Good. What affirmative promotes and preservation as a method of planning as a continuous process of coalescing social energy to resist and rewire the trajectory of debate and face of logistics as the driving force that shapes research practices and resist logistics' attempt to containerize us by endorsing being together and caring for each other for no other reason than the sake of care. The Russia scenario, I'll go to it now. Extinction outweighs work in the 2NR does not really matter when they've conceded 3 extinction impacts that are more likely in defense on their extinction scenario. It's a classic tactic of whiteness that is using some terrible extinction scenario to justify all the ongoing racist violence happening now. It's not a double turn because even if you buy into their extinction arguments, we criticize the rhetoric of Russia specifically via the Ahmed evidence. While Ahmed does talk about multipolar cooperation, the pursuit of hegemony prevents international cooperation. Countries like U.S., Russia, and China working together is key to preventing epidemics, global warming, terrorism, nuclear war. All these impacts lead to extinction. That's the 2AC Boehner 18 card. The ontology argument they made in the 2AC provides our argument because black and brown people are always closer to death right now than anyone else, which turns all their morality arguments. We win a 1% risk that extinction does not happen. You voting act because we have a 100% risk of violence happening to black and brown people now, and the conceded multilateral cooperation argument means that it definitely solves it, and collapsing hegemony obviously prevents multilateral cooperation. We're winning an argument at a paradigm above their extinction first scenario, which is that their rhetoric just seeks to polarize one to be on their own side. The Ahmed evidence is all great on this, and NATO is just as bad as Russia, which means defending hegemony in debate creates more racist subject. This, coupled with the no-link argument I'm going to explain later, basically takes out the Russia scenario entirely since they've conceded that there's no internal link between debate and hegemony collapse. We did not drop the Russia scenario. We criticized the securitization of the rhetoric, which was in the Ahmed evidence. This provides good warrants for why people in the Ukraine and Baltics know that they're going to die anyway because the U.S. does not actually care about them. I'm going for 3 arguments here. One is that there's no link. The 2NC was great and the 2NR was great about reading cards and explaining how hegemony collapse is super bad, but failed to explain the internal link between debate and the hegemony collapse broadly. The 1AC is an endurance mechanism, and that does not do anything to hegemony collapse. Remember, the burden of proof is on them to prove the internal link. You cannot just say that extinction exists, so you're voting neg anyway if there's no link. The 2NC cross-6 was pretty damning for them when I repeatedly asked the internal link, and the answer was just that you said NATO to bad, that creates subject, and Russia doesn't like that. If the link is such that leftist discussions broadly collapse hedge discussion, then it's non-unique because the leftist discussions have been happening for ages and have existed forever, but the extinction effect has not happened. And then 2 is that hedge is bad for multilateral cooperation, which is all in the BNR 18 card, which is dropped in the 2NR and solves all their impacts. This is defense of their extinction scenario, and it's definitely a reason to vote F. The 2AC card is great on this, but it explains why multilateral cooperation solves all their impacts of Russia creating, because we've explained how Russia is just as bad as the US, so it's only a question of whether the act collapses hegemony. We're winning that multilateral cooperation solves all this. Go to the counter argument. The counter-advocacy is flawed on multiple levels. They have no offensive arguments or way out of saying that competition is intrinsically bad when they're not distinct from the status quo. The counter-advocacy is honestly just like, hey, I see you do critical debate, but I don't like that, so go join the book club. Brackets out our testing of our critical strategies, which means we have no other way to test tacticality to move towards indebtedness, to be indebted to each other. Only the permutation solves this. 1, we can both agree that the counter-advocacy is just the status quo now. A forum at St. Mark's doesn't uniquely change anything because people will still attend the forum and forget about logistics ruining. That social energy is a continuous process and not a one-and-done thing where we can just talk about it at St. Mark's and boom, all logistics is gone. 2 is Coppell has been reading the software and literature spread of logistics throughout debate, but that couldn't have been happened absent the reading of F and people voting on it and people testing it, which is made in the terms of literature in order to be, i.e. how Aidan Barton read Moden in order to cut the undercommon catering Emory semis in 2020. Competition was key in that process because it's specifically a testing process and how the app started as a race war, but then we realized that race war is a harmful analytic and we create these testing processes where we can actually refine our strategy and move against logistics better. The removal of competition is worse because we can't truly decide whether something is a good idea without a neutral arbitrator. they said we linked to logistics. The 8 minute of 1AC via the Melamed evidence and Moan and Harney evidence is great. On this question, which is that happy cloudy and being mutually indebted is a gift of military preservation, which doesn't solve alone because the logistics spills into them. They said it links equally back to that, but no, the app's endurance mechanism. We're actually doing stuff in the face of logistics, whereas the counter advocacy kind of just gets together and just talks about it, which obviously does not create any movements or test any movements to move against logistics. They said the Reed Brinkley highlight and that there's no security cooperation argument. It's not about whether security cooperation is key, it's about why debate is key. Debate is specifically key to test competition strategies, and I've already done all that work earlier, and the Reed Brinkley highlight literally does not say anything. This is about creating diversity within debate, i.e. recruiting other people of other races to join debate. It's not about testing strategies. You should read the rest of the card. It's about how competition is key to testing strategies and key to generate the best ethical strategies. They said at alliance fracturing, this was the only dissent to the permutation. There's no warrant, but people are still in debate and still friends outside of debate. This was in the one era, and it takes out the argument because people are still competitive about their advocacies, but it doesn't cause infighting with other people because we can still be friends outside of the round, and competitive nature is about refining the strategies, not specifically negating specific people. The permutation definitely solves all of this. Debate's competitive nature is good for testing strategies, or else the counterplay just results in feel-good politics where we do a bunch of things, we discuss a bunch of things, but nothing actually gets done because no one has the incentive to act on it. Only debate's competitive scene creates the incentive for students to revise their strategies and make them as good as possible and actually enact them to combat violence, or else we'll just get together, talk about it, feel super good about it, but nothing actually happens, and boom, logistics is coming back. If you don't give us the perm, the counterplay definitely links back to all the Russia stuff because this is a direct example of the leftist melancholia they were talking about. Good debate.
Good
Good
debate.
I'd be curious what card y'all would put into something labeled relevant card doc. What one do you think I should read?
Okay.
We'll see if your list compares to mine. It's one of the reasons I like doing that experiment. All right, yeah, give me a bit. Take all my time.
Oh, I said the neg cards.
Sweet.
F dog should be small.
Thank you.